The Grinning Man. December 8, 2024, 11:45 p.m. The town was too quiet. The kind of quiet that makes your ears ring, as if nature itself were holding its breath. Outside, fresh snow drifted down in weightless flakes, coating the Catskill streets in a milky hush. I had just dragged myself home after a late shift at the diner, my limbs numb from both exhaustion and the biting cold. Inside, the lights hummed softly, and I poured steaming cocoa into a chipped mug. I was desperate for warmth, for something normal. Then my phone buzzed. A Reddit notification. The username was a random jumble of letters I didn't recognize. No profile picture, no history. Just a single post. Subject: Beware the Grinning Man. Content: If you hear 3 knocks on your door tonight, do not answer. Do not even look outside. The Grinning Man is out there. I snorted at it, some twisted internet prank. Still, an uneasy ripple ran down my spine. The phrasing, the timing, it all felt too deliberate. I shook my head, trying to brush off the chill creeping over me. I left the phone on my bedside table and climbed into bed, my blankets pulled tight. December 9, 2024, 12:07 a.m. I was half asleep when the sound came. Knock. 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 3 distinct raps against the front door. My pulse hammered. That post, could it have been a warning? Or just some local kids playing a prank? I forced myself up, legs shaking. Just look once, I thought. Just to confirm it's nothing. I peeked through the curtain's edge. The streetlights were weak, but they revealed a tall silhouette standing inches from my door. He didn't move like a normal person. He stood too straight, too still, head tilted slightly upward as if sniffing the air, or sensing my gaze. I clamped a hand over my mouth to stifle a gasp and let the curtain fall back into place. December 9, 2024, 12:10 a.m. The knocking stopped. Relief washed over me in a trembling wave. Maybe whoever it was had given up. I crawled back into bed, heart rattling in my chest, trying to convince myself that everything was fine, that I'd sleep this off. December 9, 2024, 12:15 a.m. The silence shattered. Knock. 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 This time more forceful, more urgent. My phone buzzed. The same unknown user, now sending a direct message. You looked, didn't you? He's coming. My lungs tightened as if gripped by an icy hand. How did they know I looked? I leapt out of bed and locked every door, every window, tugged the curtains so tight no light could slip in. I barricaded myself in the bedroom with a chair jammed under the doorknob. My phone felt heavier than lead in my hand, a cursed talisman I wished I'd never touched. December 9, 2024, 12:25 a.m. My breath formed white puffs in the darkened room. The temperature had dropped impossibly fast. Then I heard it, a voice, no louder than a hiss but cutting through the silence as if whispered right against my ear. Let me in. I froze. The voice came from the other side of my bedroom door. How had he gotten inside the house? I pressed myself against the far wall, too terrified to speak. Let me in. The voice cracked, something wet and gurgling under the words. The doorknob rattled. The hinges groaned. Slowly, painfully, the door creaked open just a sliver. It was too dark to see details, but I felt him there, taller than the doorway, his silhouette scraping against the ceiling. The smell that drifted in was rancid, like decaying leaves and old meat. Then he leaned forward, into a faint shaft of moonlight. That grin. A mouth stretched far beyond human limits. Teeth upon teeth, rows that vanished into blackness. Lips curved into a mocking crescent that never ended. Eyes, if he had eyes, were lost behind shadow, but I felt them digging into my soul. You shouldn't have looked, he whispered, each word punctured by a sound like bone scraping bone. He lunged before I could scream. That grin was the last thing I saw as it devoured my vision, blotting out the room, the bed, my very sense of self. They say they found me the next morning, curled in a corner of my bedroom. The barricade still in place. I was frozen solid, my face twisted in silent terror. Neighbors, police, they had no explanation. My phone lay near me, its screen cracked but still showing that final, damning message. No one believes the stories now whispered around town. No one wants to remember the warnings posted online. But somewhere out there, on a quiet snowy night, if you hear 3 knocks at your door, you'd better pray you don't look. Because the grinning man is waiting for just that, your curiosity, your fear, the moment you dare to peek. And once you do, there's no going back. Where do you feel fear? Dr. Peeble asked, his voice calm but distant, as though he weren't really there. He knelt beside the examination chair, gloved hands hovering just inches above my skin. He pointed at my legs first, as if testing my honesty. Did I feel fear in my legs? No, I said softly. My legs were nothing but numb pillars beneath me, not places where fear took root. Your neck then, he pressed, tipping his head to the side, curiosity gleaming in his eyes. I shook my head. Not there either, I said, voice trembling. There was no fear coiled at my throat, no anxious tightening under my jaw. Where is it? He insisted, leaning closer. His breath smelled faintly of antiseptic, of stale corridors and old secrets. Only in my left wrist, I admitted finally. My left wrist, where the flesh seemed to tingle and tighten, where anxiety pooled like stagnant water behind thin skin. Dr. Peeble smiled, pleased by my confession. Without warning, he produced a pair of long, shining scissors, an instrument too crude for any reasonable medical purpose. Before I could protest, he began prodding and snipping at my left wrist. Each delicate stab was not deep, but it stung. With each prick, I felt a strange lessening of dread, as if the metal blades were extracting filaments of fear from the tissue. Oddly enough, it worked, at least a little. The fear ebbed. Afterwards, still lightheaded from the procedure, I wandered to a club that promised an unusual experience, the feeling of being wanted. They took us high, up a towering building, and lined us at the balcony's edge. As I leaned over, an unsettling sensation washed through me. The ground far below seemed hungry, pulling at me with an invisible tether. A fellow in the group succumbed first, he leapt, maybe seeking that twisted form of belonging. We watched, horrified and fascinated, as he struck the pavement with a wet, final thud. The ground, it appeared, had claimed him eagerly, as though devouring its prize. We stood there, entranced by how desperately the earth seemed to want us all. Shaken, I returned to Dr. Peeble. My left wrist still harbored a faint tremor of fear. He nodded understandingly, taking up the scissors again, pressing them more aggressively this time. Sharp snips, little stabs, and I watched crimson beads well up like evidence of an eviction, fear being forced out. Strangely, it receded even further. Then came official news, strange and surreal. The immigration agency had decided that only my torso was granted full citizenship in this country. My arms, legs, and head, those would have to go. Deportation, they called it. They'd be severed from me, leaving only my trunk behind. Yet I felt gratitude. At least some part of me would remain. Better something than nothing, I told myself through a haze of shock and disbelief. Later, I stood again before Dr. Peeble, though I was changed now. Headless, limbless, I existed in some reduced form. He asked where I felt fear now, and to my surprise, I no longer located it in my body. Instead, I felt it in him, in his very heart. Perhaps my fear had migrated, like a parasite. Dr. Peeble didn't hesitate. He turned those scissors on himself, pressing them into his own chest. With each grisly insertion, I sensed fear draining away from me entirely, as though I was finally free. I drifted back to that group, the one that sought belonging, that dark camaraderie found at deadly heights. We climbed again to the top of a towering structure. The floor below seemed to sing a siren's call, a low hum of want. It was unsettling, this feeling of being desired by something so vast and impersonal. One by one, they jumped, bodies plummeting into that hungry pavement. Each impact echoed like shattered plates dropped from a great height, bone and flesh rearranged by the earth's longing embrace. The ground truly wanted them. Wanted us all, perhaps. In that final, surreal moment, I understood that fear, belonging, and the pull of the unknown could twist reality into horrors unimaginable. The grinning man, the ground's desire, Dr. Peebles' surgical cruelty, it all bled together, a tapestry of nightmares against the backdrop of silent streets and a sky that refused to speak. And in that silence, fear had no place left to hide.